We're going to get started today. Hello and welcome everyone this afternoon to our outreach connection for child care centers. Um, Folks from the Department of Human Services and the Department of Children, Youth and Families have joined together today. Oh, someone's saying they can't hear me. Can no one hear me? Okay, someone else can hear me. So I hope that's not a big problem. So I'll try to make sure I'm speaking clearly. Okay. Like I said, we have people joining us today from the Department of Human Services and from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to share information with you about what's going on at the state that pertains to licensed child care centers. So for first, some housekeeping issues. And first of all, my name is Rena Hendrum. I'm a child care training specialist in the licensing division. I have included a link to our webpage and to the handout for today in the chat. Today's presentation is being recorded. So therefore the chat feature is disabled during the presentation. But our panelists will be entering links and such into the chat for you all to grab and open those if they pertain to something that you'd like to look further into. At the conclusion of the slide deck, we will enable the chat feature for attendees. So then what I will do is I will read the question aloud as they come in, and then the panelists that it pertains to will answer your question, but I'll stop recording before that occurs. So also, we will be posting this recording to our webpage, but it will take a little bit of time. Just wanted to make you aware because of the transition of DHS, which we'll be speaking about during the presentation today. Because of that transition, our web pages, there's going to be just some delay as they're kind of moving everything over. So typically, we'd like to have these recordings posted within about a week or so. It could take as much as 2 weeks or so this time. So just keep your eyes peeled for when that is able to be posted. But today, we have people from all throughout, like I said, DCYF and DHS to share information with you. We have Karen Kunze here today to take us through an update on the legislative session from this year. We have Brandon Tice here to talk about the Regulation Modernization Project and the draft 2 of the child care licensing standards. We have Dana here, or Dana Ellingson from the Great Start Compensation Payment Program. She's going to take you through some exciting things that are happening in that. And then we have John Sill here from Digital Services to talk to you about the Provider Hub. And then Peggy Cunningham from Licensing to talk about some licensing updates. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope that you gain some good information today. So Karen Kunze, take it away.
Great, thanks Rena. Hi everyone. Like Rena said, my name is Karen Kunze. I'm a policy analyst for licensing and just going to start things off with a brief legislative update. Next slide. So first we want to remind you about a change that happened last year, but will come into effect next week. So effective next week on June 18th, the licensing division, the child care center licensing, will be moving over to the new Department of Children, Youth and Families, to DCYF. With that move, the existing licensing standards are going to be moving from Chapter 245A into a new chapter of statutes called Chapter 142B. So the location of where the requirements will be changing, but the requirements themselves remain the same. So it's just a new place to find them. So we sent out an email last fall. There have been several kind of reminder emails about this change, but we know it is a significant one. So wanted to highlight it and remind folks again today. There is a link to the crosswalk document in the handout that Rena mentioned, that shows where the requirements are in 245A and where the requirements will be in 142B. And just a reminder, the only things that are changing are those locations that are currently in 245A. So the requirements found in Minnesota rules won't move. The background study requirements will continue to be in Chapter 245C. They won't move. And the Maltreatment of Minors Act requirements will continue to be in 260E and won't move either. Next, wanted to just highlight a little bit about the 2025 legislative session. So the regular session ended on May 19th. The legislature still had work to do, ran out of time and wasn't able to complete all the budget bills. So as you probably heard in the news earlier this week, they returned for a special session on June 9th on Monday to complete their work. And they were able to pass all their budget bills. And we are kind of going through what passed this week, and we'll be working on a licensed child care center 2025 implementation plan, because there were several areas that impact child care centers and the work the department does. So we want to be sure to update you on all of those details. So we'll be working on an implementation plan that will be emailed out, as it always is, and posted on the website. We send it out to all of the authorized agents for child care centers, as well as anybody who's subscribed to our child care center listserv. So if you haven't received those implementation plans in the past, be sure to sign up for the listserv. There's a link to it in the handout that Brenna mentioned earlier. And with that, I'll pass it back to Brenna.
All right, thanks so much, Karen. Next, we have Brandon Tice here to talk to you today. He's a licensing policy analyst, and he's going to speak about the second draft of the Child Care Center licensing standards. Welcome, Brandon.
Thanks, Rena. Thanks, everyone, for making the time this afternoon. All right. Yeah, so next slide. We'll just get started. So just like to share this graphic, familiar for those of you who have heard our presentations before, but it shows the Child Care Regulation Modernization Project. We'd just like to remind folks that we are both for licensed child care centers and family child care. So, two separate types, but they are kind of coordinated in parallel. And we do have three components. We have our risk-based tiered violation system, or the weighted risk system. That is a component where every licensing... Oh. Got some chatter. Dana, I think you might want to mute yourself. There we go. Okay. As I was saying, the risk-based tiered violation system, or the weighted risk system, where every licensing standard will receive, with that weighted risk assessment we did a few years ago, would have a weight assigned between 1 and 10, and those that have a lower weight are eligible for documented technical assistance, which is a lower risk designation similar to the fix-it ticket, and would be an expanded number of items eligible for that. Then you have the key indicator system for abbreviated inspections. So this is shortened inspections for providers who meet certain eligibility criteria, basically in good standing, they are eligible for those shortened inspections. And then revised licensing standards. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I just like to mention those other two components. They can't be implemented until the provider hub is implemented for all childcare license types, so including our family childcare colleagues. It's sort of on pause on those for now. And there would be more info coming out once we get to the point where we're ready to roll those out. But today we're going to talk about the draft licensing standards and everything with that. Next slide. So in 2021, the Minnesota legislature directed DHS to work with NARA, the National Association for Regulatory Administration, to develop these licensing standards. So that's the genesis of this project, of the licensing standards work. The two-part directive they gave us is that the standards be grounded in national regulatory best practices, and that they must protect the health and safety of children, be child-centered, family-friendly, and fair to providers. So those are the two things that we're balancing as we work on this draft 2, and getting all of your input. Next slide. So the draft 2, we shared it in February 2025. It's not final language. It's just a working document designed to continue to get your feedback. and your feedback, as well as parents and licensors and all other interested parties in this process. So we're gathering feedback until the end of June. So we're kind of on our final push to get everyone to get their thoughts and questions and ideas in to us, and then basically at the end of June we'll pause that feedback and collecting that feedback, and then we'll just start compiling everything, really identifying what needs to change in the draft based on what has been discussed with us. So that is the draft 2. Also, you'll see on this with the draft 3, that's what we're going to create after this round closes and we do the revision. We also are committed to sharing this prior to the 2026 legislative session, and that 2026 legislative session begins February of 2026. So at some point before that, as soon as we can get the draft 3 and supplemental materials ready, that will be shared publicly for everyone to see. Next slide. Okay, so now I will give an overview of some of the significant changes between draft 1 and draft 2 of the standards. Okay, so first off, staff qualifications and education. So in draft 1, we did introduce some flexibilities, hearing that staffing was a major concern for all of you, getting staff in, and keeping staff turnover. So we did have increased flexibility in terms of the hours of experience and in terms of how many educational credits an individual would need to qualify for those teacher or assistant teacher roles. In draft 2, that is continued. We added in an additional associate's credential option for early an accredited diploma or associate's degree in child development or early childhood education. And we also worked with the Montessori Network and the PELSB, Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, to update those credential options specific to their work as well, just to make sure we're kind of updating and fine-tuning things as we go. We also experienced aid qualifications, so made some changes to the aid and experienced aid as well. So aid has just been renamed to aid 1. It's still substantively the same, but the big change is experienced aids we're now referring as aid 2. So trying to show a bit of a progression between starting as an aid 1 and gaining that experience, and then having that aid 2 position. However, with the aid 2 position, you are no longer required to track how they are used. So you do still have the 25% of your operating hours restriction on that, but that requirement in terms of you can only use so many per full-time teachers and assistant teachers you have has been removed, as well as the more detailed kind of tracking requirements that were spelled out. So that has been changed, and then we also the required hours of experience has been reduced from 4,160 to 2,080 hours. And then we have the expanded definition of education. So the expanded definition of education, really that is just adding more coursework to what can count towards someone qualifying. So history, social science, math, science, psychology broadly. I think previously it was just child psychology. Now it's also just psychology generally. So we're trying to align with some of those core course academic subjects, but trying to really acknowledge and understand that there is a broader set of education that can be of value in the classroom with children. So next slide. Finally, with our training requirements, or sorry, I shouldn't say finally. There was so much information on that last slide. The other ones will be a little more straightforward, I promise. Okay, training requirements. We have the childcare basics training in draft 1. That continues to be the case in draft 2. Just want to make sure people are aware that this would be a new training to be developed by DHS. It would be required for all center directors, all program staff, and volunteers, and unsupervised volunteers and substitutes as well. So really across the board, having this training, but the idea here is that it would be a free training and that it, developed by DHS and it would cover those foundational topics. Some topics that we've talked about having with this could behavior guidance, active supervision of children, and as well as just like a licensing 101, like, what is licensing, what is it, expectations when your licensor comes on site, things of that nature. Just and then another topic we've discussed is possibly mandated maltreatment reporting. So sort of giving that solid baseline of information and for everyone to have when they're going into this field to get everyone on the same page. And then another training is that orientation and childcare basics training may count towards your in-service training hours. Next slide. Ratio, staff distribution, and group size. Won't go into too much detail here because this is really where referencing the draft standards language themselves is the best way to see kind of what is different here. But the big thing I want to note is that in 2 areas, we spelled out expectations in the draft 2 that are consistent with licensing practices that you should be familiar with, but this is really the first time that we're spelling it out and writing it out, so just want to call it out. Those 2 areas are flexibility and staff distribution during naps and rest time, so that that flexibility of staff being able to double the ratio for a certain period of time, unless there's infants present, for staff to as long as they're within the building while children are napping, for staff to go and take a break or do things like that as long as they're still in the building. And then we have a procedure for transitioning children to the next age group, which is also spelled out in the draft. And we already went over the experienced aid changes, so we'll go into that again. Next slide. Another change is in draft around outdoor activities. So in draft 1, we had language about, we really were trying to get some more specifics in terms of getting children outside and the requirements there. In draft 1, that language required for children attending 3 or more daylight hours per day that they have those outdoor opportunities. In draft 2, we heard some concerns about that applying too broadly for even really part-time programs. So we changed that to 6 or more hours per day if children are in attendance for that. Then that language around getting them outside applies. And it would be once per day for infants as practicable based on weather conditions and individual needs, and then twice per day for the older age groups. And then we did align the temperature guidance with the Minnesota Department of Health outdoor play guidance. So between negative 15 degrees accounting for wind chill and 90 degrees accounting for heat index as sort of the band of suitable weather. We've also heard quite a bit of feedback on this, so I think this is one we need to take more of a look at, but we're certainly open to any ideas or discussion on this when we get to the questions. Next slide. Okay, then we have behavior guidance. We removed the 48-hour disenrollment reporting requirement from the draft, so that's no longer in draft 2. We also clarified some definitions. Some of those should look familiar if you're using the behavior guidance form currently around the redirection and separation definition. And then the prohibition on separation for infants and toddlers. So that was in draft 1. We still have that in draft 2. Just want to draw attention to that there. So that would be for under 33 months, essentially. A separation would be prohibited as it's written in the draft 2. Next slide. Accessibility of equipment. This is a change we made. So what we were aiming for in draft 2 was to clarify that those equipment lists is what must be available on site. So your infant list, your toddler list, etc. You need to have those available on the premises on site at your center. But for what needs to be available to children, accessible to children, you just need to have sufficient equipment for children attending care on a given day. So hoping that clarifies things for you. And then we also clarified that their materials may be stored in inaccessible locations at certain times of day, art supplies and musical instruments being the ones here. And then we made some other clarifying updates as well. and a few tweaks. The double easel now is a double easel or an art making station. We heard a lot of feedback on that too. So yeah, so those are some changes there. Next slide. Facility. Changes we made here include language prohibiting the use of scented products, aerosol sprays, etc. has been taken out of the draft 2. So that prohibition language is no longer in the draft 2, so you can use those. The animal and pest control provisions have been simplified, as have the requirements for the use of non-toxic art and science materials. And then another change is that fire marshal inspections are now required every 3 years. So this is would be a bigger change, but this was in consultation with the state fire marshal's office, as well as again, going back to that national best practice, some of the recommendations from NARA based on looking at other states and their frequency, and hearing from our own state fire marshal that they do see that, and they get wind of issues that have come up since that initial fire inspection, that weren't caught because there's no sort of ongoing inspection. So open to feedback again on this, and we understand that there would be a need to hire more fire marshal inspectors. That would, we anticipate that would be a cost, but yeah, tried to put that provision in there again to get that discussion around the balance between health and safety, and some costs as well. Next slide. And then environmental health. Changes we made here is that we removed the requirement to test for leaded soil or cover bare soil. So the practicalities of that, we began to be concerned that this would cause barriers particularly for outdoor programs. So that has been removed. The water testing requirements, you are only required to test private water sources, similar to Rule 3. And we do reference and point to that requirement that passed in 2023 from the Department of Health to test for lead in water supply, which applies to centers and to schools. We just reference that. We don't add any additional requirement on top of that. But one thing we do keep in draft 2 from the draft 1 is this requirement to test for radon and to mitigate it if hazardous levels are found. Really, this comes down to the reality that Minnesota does have elevated levels of radon compared to other states. We're a bit of a hotspot for it, and that radon gas can come in through the foundation, and it's this odorless, colorless gas that causes damage to lungs essentially, and can lead to lung cancer. It's attributed to about 19,000 deaths in the U.S. Every year from lung cancer due to radon exposure. So that's the concern, and that sort of the health and safety reason for this being in the second draft. We did work to simplify the language with the Department of Health, and instead of requiring it just at initial licensure, we have it now required 2 years from the effective date of the draft if it's adopted by the legislature, and then every 5 years after that. And certainly as we work on the draft 3, again, I mentioned we can identify costs for the legislature. One thing we could do is identify the need for a grant program to help with some of the testing and mitigation costs, but ultimately that would be up to the Minnesota legislature to fund that or not. Next slide. So we're starting to talk about Minnesota legislature and some of that. So this is just our timeline and some next steps. As I mentioned, we're going until the end of June with this feedback. We have one more center virtual workshop coming up next week actually it might not be next week. I will. It's available, I know, on our project website. I believe it's June 24th. Yeah, that will be coming up soon if you want to provide some more input beyond today. And then February of 2026, prior to that, is when we want to share the draft 3 publicly with everyone. But that's really when it will be brought to the 2026 legislative session. And then during that legislative session, you can talk to your legislators. You can let them know what about the draft works for you, what doesn't work for you, and we definitely encourage that. If the legislature adopts it, and they can also amend it, but once they adopt it, then we look at implementation planning. And that's really where we would anticipate a longer implementation period to prepare all of the interpretive guidance that would be needed. That's something I haven't mentioned yet, but our hope is that we could develop this supplemental document that would really explain and offer examples and clarify in a plain language way some of the intent behind the licensing standards. So it would be clear for you as providers and for licensors in some of those scenarios where interpretation can be a little tricky, such as separation versus a redirection. So that would be part of that process of implementation planning. So we would recommend to the legislature that we have sufficient time for doing that and doing it well and making sure everyone's prepared. But ultimately, that would be up to the legislature to set that date as well. Okay, next slide. So these are the engagement opportunities we have. I can put a link to the project webpage so people can have it. But essentially, that's where you go to get all this stuff. The survey, which is live right now, again, until the end of June. We are doing virtual workshops. We have that one coming up. And then we also have our email address where you can email us at any time with your feedback. And next slide. I think that is all. Oh, and if you really want, you can get the survey, right? Just QR code right there. But I know that's available on our website as well. All right. Next slide.
All right. Thanks so much, Brandon. All right, next we have Dana Ellingson here to talk to us about the Great Start Compensation Program feature update. So Dana, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it and greatly appreciate people coming and taking their time to do this and listening. So I am going to give just updates that maybe you saw in an email that came out last week and we're hoping it reached you. But these are updates that we've been working on for you in the Provider Hub, and then also program updates in general too. So please move to the next slide and you'll just see, let's ground everyone in case you are not receiving Great Start compensation payments or you don't know about them. I want to just level set here that those Great Start compensation, the program itself is designed to increase compensation and benefits to childcare workers, supporting the industry, and also looking at eligible providers that are currently applying each month for payments. And when you receive these payments, you are agreeing to document how you use the funds and share this with the state. And so that leads us into what are some things that have been happening in the Provider Hub, which are centers licensed and certified by the state have transitioned monthly applications and also the use of funds report now. So the use of funds report for those that started when the program started back in October 2023, started receiving notices that you have a report due in the Provider Hub. And each month, depending on when you started receiving payments, you'll receive those same notices that you have a report due. So check in if you haven't to see if you have a report due. But if you move to the next slide, the why behind why are the use of funds report required? A few reminders on the left-hand side that this reports the impact of these Great Start compensation payments, and it helps us to improve support for the early childhood educators and childcare industry when we have that information. Also ensuring the responsible use of funds here in Minnesota that are given to providers. And on the right-hand side, just another reminder that there's new functionality. It is inside of the Provider Hub. You're also able to submit reports and view historical reports there and update your supplier ID or manage obtaining a supplier ID to increase your abilities like direct deposit. And so that'll be a feature that's going live here on the 26th of June. And you had received an email last week, hopefully about that, that's in there and available. Also, you can download multiple Great Start compensation payment records at once. And we've updated some features there for you to be able to download reports. Some program updates, and people are interested to be reminded of if you already heard, but also if you hadn't heard yet, the next slide shows that funding reminder that the per FTE amount will remain at $375 from July 2025 through June of 2026. So wanted to make sure people did hear about that if you hadn't already. as another reminder there, that one FTE is a staff member who works 32 hours per week. So staff members could be more than one FTE on that application, meaning more than $375, depending on how many hours those people work. Another reminder in the next slide is that starting in June for your record keeping, but on the July application, because our applications look back a month, but starting in June, make sure to note that this is the first month we are changing the policy for programs to not just be in good standing or be licensed by the state or the tribal nation, but you'll need to be in good standing for not 5 calendar days, just one during the funding period. So before, if you were completing an application but had not been open more than 5 days, you would not be able to apply for that month. But now it's just one. So each one of these shows there's a change in our policies that could be found, that you just need to be in good standing for one of those calendar days for that funding period, and open and operating and serving children for just one calendar day, and serving a minimum number of children for just one calendar day versus 5. All right, the next slide, an update to the digital enrollment and attendance update. And so there will be at some point a requirement to use the enrollment and attendance feature that will be found in the Provider Hub that you can see now, but it will be eventually required in order to complete that monthly Great Start application. But we haven't set that date. And so what we wanted to make sure you knew was in that email, but also today, that a start date for the requirement still is yet to be determined, but it will not be required during calendar year 2025. We're hoping that creates some ease or more clarity and transparency for you. And also to increase that transparency and notification, we want to let you know that once we do determine the date, you will be given 90 days at least in advance before we change that requirement. So take a breath if that's helpful. We hope it is for you. Next slide is, I think, my end. So I'm done. Thank you so much for the chance to give these updates, and always reach out to the Great Start team with questions. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Dana. All right, next up we have John Sill coming to you today from Digital Services to give you some Provider Hub updates. So John, you ready?
Yeah, I think so. Rena, can you hear me?
I can hear you and see
great.
you.
And look, I'm even looking at the right camera this time. Okay, so that's great.
Wonderful.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. Thank you for spending time with us just to learn of all these different updates that we have to share with you all. My name is John Sill. I'm the Provider Hub Product Manager, like Rena said, housed within Digital Services. And before we go to the next slide, just to give everyone a quick overview of what Digital Services entails, we've got product managers and associate product managers. We've got instructional designers who help create learning content to help support end users. We've got a content specialist that helps us update both physical and virtual content about the Provider Hub. And we've got a team of user experience and user design folks. Their job is to collect that feedback from end users such as yourselves to funnel up needs and requests or questions to us as product managers to prioritize what new features or enhancements we want to offer next. And then we do have a change manager in our group too. Majority of the updates that I'll be sharing with you today focus on all the really wonderful work that our instructional design team and content strategists have performed over the last bit of time. So just a quick grounding for you all for what our digital services team entails. We'll go to the next slide there, Brenna. Okay. And then, of course, another quick grounding slide here, the Provider Hub. And I think everyone's familiar with what it is, but the Provider Hub is a place where you can apply for social service licenses, funding, and different programs where you manage your license and program requirements. Of course, you can log in anytime from any device as long as you have internet access, and it's accessible in those 4 different languages that you're seeing on your screen. Some of the current features that are in the Provider Hub today, obviously licensing and certification, Child Care Assistance Program or CCAP, the Great Start Compensation Support Program or Payment Program, and then enrollment and attendance tracking, ENA. As always, folks can get more information on the website via that URL you see on your screen there. And then, of course, you can always sign up for Provider Hub updates also, where you can sign up on that website, which has recently been updated, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so just again, quick updates to share today. Essentially just new resources available now for licensed centers. I'll recap real quick some work that we have in progress on our team in the Provider Hub, but then also what's coming up next week in regards to updates for the DCYF transition that we need to keep in account and prepare for the Provider Hub work. Next slide. Okay, perfect. So the first new resource that we have available is just, again, that updated web page with a current list of those features that I talked about on that first Provider Hub grounding slide. And I think that the biggest takeaway, and for folks to know that on this particular web page before, it really focused in on just licensing resources, but we've expanded that to include some resources for other features. So I think the content specialist in our user instructional design team has done a really good job updating this with the necessary content. Next slide. There we go. Along with updating the web page itself is a part of that web page will actually feature different learning libraries. And those different learning libraries contain different what we call knowledge articles on how end users can complete tasks or go through certain processes in order to maintain your license in the Provider Hub. Before we went through and made these updates, all of those knowledge articles would only be accessible by logging into the Provider Hub, but we've actually moved those knowledge articles out to the public website, so anyone can access those learning materials if need be. To kind of hone a little bit further down into those resources, we have certain highly viewed, high-level processes that folks need help with. And one additional thing that we've done is to kind of like help folks filter down to maybe the specific type of process they need to do in the Provider Hub. So, for example, what you're seeing on your screen is just one section is just focused around change requests. Rather than us give you a link for an article that's 30 plus pages long, we've created some different particular hyperlinks with resources that will take you to that specific change request, for example, that you would want to perform in the Provider Hub. Again, all that can be kind of boiled down to in those new learning libraries, and translations are in progress. So we're providing equity amongst all of our different providers. The one other thing that I do want to point out on this page is we did highlight one particular e-learning resources there. It is the Provider Hub change requests. What's your type? I can't highly recommend enough for folks to check that particular learning resource out. Our instructional design team did a really good job of kind of like grounding folks in what is a change request, where do I make those change requests, why would I go to these screens versus others. It's a nice little click-through tool that really kind of helps guide folks to where you would submit those change requests in the Provider Hub. It's a really cool tool that our instructional designers created, so can't recommend that enough. And then, of course, kind of in a similar vein, there is a new interactive course on how to do foundational tasks in the Provider Hub. This is really geared for any sort of new users as you're onboarding any new employees at your centers to get a little bit more acclimated within the Provider Hub. This will help folks, how to create an account, change your password, update your language, and set up user access and permissions. And as with other things that are currently work in progress is our translations. Again, you'll find this resource in those new learning libraries accessible via the new web page. DCYF transitions coming next week. A lot of our work in digital services is changing on a sometimes daily basis. So we actually went through some of this information slides 2 days ago at the MCCA conference, and per a meeting yesterday, there's one thing on here that got updated. So I'll share that with you today. So long story short, some of these things to account for the DCYF transition that are focusing on the provider hub are the certificates will be updated to reflect those changes of the new agency, and that will include, you know, statute references, signatures, all that good stuff. And then a transition from kind of that DHS, Department of Human Services logo in the top left corner of the provider hub when you log in, that will be updated to more of just that general state of Minnesota logo, since we will have provider hub users that are in different agencies. So we're accommodating that branding update as well. And that third bullet, targeting June 18th for some of those key revisions with others to follow. One thing that was updated as of yesterday is that those certificates those will now be updated effective June 18th. But some of the other stuff like the branding things, those will be delayed by just a week. Really, the only thing that impacts you would just be that logo in the top left corner. You'll still see DHS after the June 18th, but that will be updated June 25th. As always, we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do, and we are still, you know, trying to make the certain processes and functionalities work better. And help support the end users. I think the thing that's top of mind for me continues to be improving the process to submit staff training and qualifications, otherwise known as the personnel redesign. A lot of work has gone into this. Unfortunately, I don't have any particular pieces to share for updates or timelines. Just know that folks are still working on that redesign of what that looks like. Once we do have tangible things to share in regards to updates, please know that we will be communicating those out to you. But just know that we continue to get really good feedback and valid feedback that is a frustration point for provider hub end users. Another thing that folks are working on is the ability to report incidents to your licensors from within inside the provider hub too, amongst many other things. I think this might be one of the last updates I got to share today. So there is something brand new that is not only impacting the provider hub, but all sorts of different, you know, state of Minnesota software solutions across the entire state. Long story short, this new thing, it's called Login MN, and it's a centralized secure sign-in system designed to streamline access to digital state services. So really the gist is to allow an end user to have one email address and one password that will enable you to log into all sorts of different state systems like the provider hub, or let's say you want to book a campground, a campsite at a campground up north. You would be getting that online access and utilizing this Login Minnesota solution. For you today, there's no action. There's nothing different that's going to change for you to access the provider hub. So there's really nothing that you need to know today. We have been invited to many more meetings as far as like making sure we get all of our business requirements and getting our questions posed to the folks who are working on this implementation. Once we have a better understanding of what this will entail for provider hub end users, just know that we'll be sending that detailed information and instructions to you all well before that change occurs. But again, this is something that will be implemented within the provider hub at some point in the somewhat near future, I believe, but it is impacting all statewide solutions. This slide right here is just a quick visual of what the heck I'm even talking about. So Provider Hub users today, when you go to log in, you get directed to that really beautiful gray void with a DHS logo where you can create an account or have that existing account sign in. The visual that you're seeing on the right of your screen, once this new login Minnesota solution is implemented, it'll just be a little bit more appealing to the eye. And we'll have a beautiful backdrop of the wonderful city of St. Paul, where I'm at today. It's nice out here. But again, that is a draft of what the Login Minnesota solution looks like. But again, once we have more information, we'll send it your way. As always, please know that we are gathering and creating as many resources to support end users as we can to help you use the tool. As always, please refer to those resources now that are available on the public website and or within the Provider Hub itself. And just know that new resources are created based on user questions. So if you're not finding something, you're having difficulty finding a documentation on how to do something, let us know and we can instruct our wonderful instructional design team to create something that will help support end users. And as always, if you want immediate support, please feel free to submit a support case in the Provider Hub itself by calling that number on your screen, and that local support team does respond to those support cases Monday through Fridays from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And again, please do not hesitate to give us your feedback, share comments, ask questions, sign up to take part in feedback opportunities such as completing a survey or testing a new feature. Actually, at the MCCA conference itself, we had some really good conversations at our table, and one of our extremely talented user experience folks, Beckett Love, I believe he's getting an organic user group put together based from folks who attended that conference to have a conversation about the Provider Hub. So please, just know that we're here to support you as best we can, and we will try to meet you where you're at. By sending an email to that email address on your screen as well, that also puts you in touch with other teams that were highlighted at the very beginning of my portion of this presentation from those other features like Great Start, Great Start Compensation, CCAP, and enrollment and attendance. So again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via that email address.
Thank you so much, John. That was very informative. All right, little quick change on the fly here as I understand it. Peggy Cunningham is joining us in a little bit, but there was a forced restart, so she's gonna just work through that. And in the meantime, Jay Condon is a supervisor within our licensing unit, and he is gonna start us off today with updates from the licensing team. So take it away, Jay.
All right, perfect, Rona. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. It was really fun looking at the attendees of the meeting today and seeing so many people that I recognize and remember from the field. So that was pretty exciting to see. So hello to everybody. Again, like Rena said, my name is Jay Condon. I'm a supervisor with the licensing division. Peggy will be back on shortly, and she will take over and resume wherever we are at. I'm going to attempt to go through her notes and everything and keep everything moving along. We really appreciate the time with everybody. Anytime that we can get the opportunity to share information with you guys, to help you guys run your centers with confidence, we really appreciate those sorts of things that we can do. We also like to take opportunities to stress the commitment that we as a department have to supporting childcare providers. In licensing, our role is to monitor for compliance, but we also believe our role is to help you all understand the requirements so you can successfully operate your programs. Utilize your licensor and reach out when you have questions or unsure of something. It really is a partnership between us and you guys, and we really want that partnership to be strong. So reach out if you don't, continue to reach out to your licensor. If you already are, they are there to help. And don't forget about our licensor on call line as well. If you can't get hold of your licensor, but you need to talk to somebody, somebody's always there from 8 to 4:30 every day. They do return voice messages if you have to leave a message. All right, so let's see. We are transitioning to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I don't know if anybody heard about that. Of course you all did, but June 18th will be our first day that we will be going to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. In light of that move, we thought it might be helpful to highlight a few things to help you understand what parts of the Department of Human Services, OIG, which is the Office of Inspector General, is moving to DCYF, and then what is staying at the Department of Human Services. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's mostly behind the scenes, so we hope that your guys' experience will be pretty seamless and you won't notice much differences at all. So all the childcare licensing and certification licensors and our unit will be moving to DCYF. And that's licensed childcare centers, certified centers, and family childcare. So we will all be moving over on June 18th. And then a subset of that current DHS, Department of Human Services Intake and Investigations unit, will also move to DCYF, and they will continue to manage the intake responsibilities and maltreatment investigations. The Child Care Regulations Modernization Project team is another area that will be transferring. And then finally, the group of the DHS OIG that conducts childcare audits and investigations related to program integrity will also be moving over to DCYF as well. We can go to the next slide. And then a few things that are going to be staying at DHS, as we can see here, background studies in the provider hub. So although childcare licensing is moving to DCYF, there are other areas you work with that will remain at DHS. The background studies division is staying at DHS, and you'll continue to use NetStudy 2.0 to submit background studies and manage your roster as you normally do. The background study process will remain the same, other than if someone is disqualified, the reconsideration process will be done with DCYF. So that's just a little different. And then how you reach out to contact someone from the background studies division will remain the same as it is right now. So use those resources you have now to reach out to them. The provider hub team who manages the hub will also be remaining at DHS. But you and your licensor will continue to use the hub as you do today. So there won't be much difference for you in that sense. Next slide, please. So for the most part, the licensing process will remain the same. There's no change to who needs to be licensed or certified as a child care program in the state of Minnesota. The state laws that outline who needs to be licensed and who is excluded from licensure is not changing. So that's all going to remain the same. Your license is issued by DHS currently. That remains valid through the current licensing period, so meaning December 31st of this year. Your current license number will not change. That will remain the same. You do not need to reapply or take any action on your end. You'll receive a new DCYF license when your license expires at the end of this calendar year, unless you make a change to your license between now and then that involves the need for you to get a new license. So the license you currently have, even though it says DHS and we will be in DCYF, is valid, and that will remain. We're not going to send new ones out. You make a change and you get issued a new one, you will get a new license that says DCYF. The process for licensing visits will not change. Your licensor continue to send out a notice of reinspection email, NOR email, prior to your yearly licensing visit. And our goal is for the transfer to the new agency to be as seamless as possible for you and us, because it makes it a lot easier for everybody. Next slide, please. Individual email addresses and phone numbers for your licensing staff will remain the same. So continue continue to call the current number, continue to email the current email you have to get in touch with them. Our current licensor on call email and phone number will also remain the same. So continue to reach out as you normally would with that sort of stuff. No worries in changing any of that. And for right now, the mailing addresses, the PO box numbers, all of that will remain the same, as our physical office will remain at 444 Lafayette in St. Paul. This might not be permanent, since the vast majority of this might not be pertinent to you, as the vast majority of communication is just email and hub and phone calls and things like that with you and your licensor. If there is any changes to the actual mailing address, we will be sure to communicate that out to you guys. And then, as we mentioned previously, your contact points for background studies and NS2 and the provider hub will continue to be the same exact emails and phone numbers. So, and then finally with that, your login information for both of those systems will not change with our DCYF moves. So we don't have any issues with any of that. It does look like Peggy is back. Does Peggy want to hop on and go through?
Sure, Peggy can do that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
All right, now let's make sure the camera is going to work.
There you are.
Yay. All right, thank you, Jay.
Yes.
Technology is our friend. Okay, so it looks like we are at the point where we're still continuing to talk about things that are and are not changing when we move to DCYF next week. And so, you know, many of you are used to going to our licensing web pages for resource information and all kinds of stuff. And so for right now, the website will stay the same. Once we are at DCYF, work to transition the site from DHS to DCYF will take place, and there will be a redirection built into there. So if you continue to go to our DHS site, when the DCYF site is ready, it will take you there, and then you can save it as a favorite for yourself. As Karen, I believe, mentioned earlier, licensing requirements are not changing. They will remain the same. Rule 3 is the same. The Background Studies Act, which is Statute 245C, the Maltreatment of Minors Act, 260E, and all the relevant requirements in 245A, which includes things like infant safe sleep, the child care center training requirements, you know, the risk reduction plan, those things that are in 245A will move to 142B. The requirements are the same. We're all just going to have to get used to using them under a different statute number. Next slide. Okay, so a couple of things that will change, and this is really more at the main agency level, that some phone numbers will change. And I won't go through them here because they're all on the slide here, but also they are in the handout for the session, where there's a link to the OIG transition worksite. And it will include all kinds of information relevant to you regarding the transfer, including these phone numbers and email addresses, so that you can take that information and update your records accordingly. All right, as far as maltreatment reporting and investigations, effective the date that we move, June 18th, maltreatment reports should be made to the DCYF intake area rather than the DHS. And the phone number for the DCYF intake is here on the slide. You will also be able to find it in that same information that you can get to through the QR code with the handout. And so it'll be both the phone number and the email address for the DCYF intake area. And you're probably thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to have to update my maltreatment of minors reporting policy form to reflect the new DCYF central intake contact information. And just so you know, we are finalizing making changes to that form to include that updated information. And we will certainly communicate that out to you when that updated form is available, so you can get it replaced in your records with what you currently have. And then just to reiterate that any pending DHS investigations will transfer with us in the intake investigations group, also moving to DCYF, and they will be completed by the same group of people, but we'll just be at DCYF. All right, so with this slide, we really wanted to talk a little bit about an issue that continues to come to our attention. So we want to bring your awareness to it as well. And it's something that we see on an ongoing basis, and it's kind of been that way, it seems like, for the last couple of years, and that is the issue of children being left without supervision. And so we have talked about it in other conferences and other webinars over the past couple of years, but we are still seeing quite a few reports come in with allegations that children are left unsupervised. And so we just wanted to raise the issue again. And supervision for child care centers is defined in statute. It's currently in 245A, but it is moving to 142B. And it says that supervision is met when a program staff person is accountable for a child's care. They can intervene to protect the health and safety of the child, and they're within sight and hearing, except for a few carve-outs that we have related to preschool children and school-age children using the restroom. And so that's all part of the statute. But we thought, let's talk about it a little bit, because especially with summer programming that is, kicking off right now, we urge you to train and retrain your staff on the definition of supervision, so they have a very clear and full understanding of what is expected in terms of supervision of children. I think sometimes we see that staff are not engaged in the active supervision of children and are thinking it's all good as long as, we're here in the same space as them, whether that's the classroom or a playground. But to truly meet the supervision as defined, it has to include all of these elements. And so it's a good idea too to revisit the supervision section of your risk reduction plan to make sure that what you have in there really gets at the heart of it, and add to it, enhance it as you see fit, and elevate staff awareness of it and retrain people on it. So with summer programming here and a lot more school age kids in care all day, field trips are on the horizon, you will have more transitions in and out of your buildings, and transition is definitely probably one of the main times that we see children being left unsupervised. That's a lot of what we see coming in on reports, that as groups are transitioning from inside to outside, or just even different areas within your facility, that's often when children go unaccounted for. So let's work together and make sure that children are safe and adequately supervised, so that everyone's health and safety is protected. All right, so another area that we wanted to talk about a little bit today is background studies. And we wanted to, again, increase awareness of some of the background study requirements, which includes expired background studies, as well as individuals being allowed to provide direct contact services before you receive a notice that indicates they are able to do that. So this slide here is about background study expiration dates. And we are seeing a lot of scenarios where studies are expiring and or expired. And unfortunately, we have to issue a fine for those types of violations, and we do not like to issue fines, and we would prefer not to issue fines. So that's the reason for us bringing it up here, is to help you understand what you need to do to remain in compliance. And so childcare background studies have to be completed every 5 years. So you have to initiate a new study before each staff person's study expires. However, it's a little more complicated than that, because you need to know that you cannot initiate the study more than 90 days before the expiration date. And the expiration date is based on when the individual last had their fingerprints taken. So if you initiate more than 90 days before that expiration date, essentially what happens is the study does not get renewed. And so it will have the same expiration date. Net Study 2 has data in your roster to help you track the expiration dates. And the next slide will show you, hopefully you can see that. We realize it's probably a little bit small, but we mocked up a fake background study roster because we thought it might be most helpful for you to see a roster as we're talking about it. So the highlighted column you see there that's titled Determination Expiration Dates tells you what expiration date there is for each study for each individual on your roster. So use this data to track when to submit new studies. The column directly to the left of that, the determination column, will show when the study is expired. So you can see in this example, there is one, two, three, four, five rows down, it says expired in red. That tells you that study has already expired. So you definitely want to get a new one initiated, but hopefully the goal here is for you to get studies initiated before they expire. The column to the right, whoops, can you go back to that, Ronna? Thank you. The column to the right of the determination expiration date is fingerprints taken date. And so that will be helpful for you to understand that because expiration dates are based on when the individual last had their fingerprints taken, that you can see here the date that was. And so, for example, it may be that you hire somebody who had fingerprints taken for a different provider. And what you need to understand is that because those fingerprints were able to be applied to your study, that the fingerprints will determine the 5-year expiration date, not the date that you submitted the background study under your license number. So that's why it's important to understand the expiration date of a person's study is based on the fingerprint date, not necessarily the date that you submitted it under your license number. Okay, we can move to the next now. So this is just a reminder. Check your rosters on a regular basis and look for those dates so you know when the background studies for your staff are going to expire. And then also just a gentle reminder to separate individuals from your roster if they are no longer affiliated with your program. All right, so the other issue related to background studies we wanted to talk about are the background study notices. And we're also seeing a fair number of scenarios where license holders are allowing staff to work in a direct contact position or role before a notice is received. And the statute, the law, and it's also a federal requirement under the federal block grant requirements, dictates that an individual cannot provide direct contact services until a notice is received. And there are essentially 3 different types of notices you could receive. They're listed here, but I'll talk about each a little bit. So the more time needed letter is a notice stating that more time is needed to complete the study. And these get issued for a variety of reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to be disqualified, but it could be that something within the study information is incomplete. It could be that the background study division is waiting for information in order to complete the study. So there's a variety of reasons why you might receive that. If you receive a notice like this, follow the information in the notice, including whether or not the individual may be able to provide direct contact services, sometimes under supervision. So read carefully and then follow those steps. The second time is the clearance letter, and this is the notice that tells you that the person has been cleared to work in a direct contact capacity. And then finally, the third is the disqualification notice, and this is another type of notice you could receive. In this case, definitely read the letter carefully, follow the direction provided in that letter because it's likely the individual will not be able to provide direct contact services. There are some exceptions related to reconsiderations and those sorts of things, but again, the key here is to read what the notices, the letters are telling you, and to make sure you follow those instructions. Okay, so that's it for me, Rena. And I'll hand it off to you to lead us into our next part of the presentation.
Yes. Well, yes, that concludes the informational part of the presentation today. So I want to thank all of you, but we do have time to field some questions. So first thing I'm going to do is stop recording. Oh, and stop the screen there. Okay, hold on, and then I'm going to stop recording. And then